Hello everyone and welcome to Weekend Winters. Oh, you can kind of see what kind of day I'm having. Anyway, so I got a new setup and I realized that I haven't really checked for the lighting, and the lighting is not, it's really different now. So anyway, hi, how you doing? I'm Christy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is, whenever it is you are. We are going to discuss the issue of early voting in the US election in this episode. But first of all, I just want to tell you, I'm a little on a personal note, pretty excited, everyone, because I am, little by little, always building up my studio here as I develop, because I become really intolerant of little mistakes that I make, and as a consequence, I have to, Thank you for telling me the music. See, I'm just harried today. I'm just like really flustered because I'm running late and I should just do things properly. All right, find my zen. All right, is that better? Yeah, I'm more centered now. See, this is the stuff I should do before the show, but I was running late today. So, thank you for telling me the music was on. Do appreciate that. That is sorted now. Anything else I've effed up before we start? So as you can see, my lighting looks a little bit different, and that's because love when the jacket pulls this way. I changed up my setting. It might sound a little less echoey now, but I thought I would give you guys a little once around to see what I've done differently, what's caused in part some of this chaos. And first though, I'm going to pop out the chat because you guys are so important to me. Making sure that I get your feedback so I don't mess up 100% of stuff. All right, yes, we are all set now. Let me get you guys on your proper screen so I can see you. And then I will show you. Yeah, so I bought a bunch of egg crate foam stuff, 110 centimeters worth, and set it up here. So let me just finish this up. Move guys over here. You'll see as I go. All right, I'm gonna take this now. I'm gonna take and have a little look. See, so you can see this is me, like where I do my show. And I guess we'll go this way. Yeah. So the bedroom. There's a window here. You can see I've got that blocked off for the light. And then we've got, the egg crate foam, which doesn't quite go to the ceiling. And I've got some other drapery there. That was the original intent, was to absorb some of the sound around me. So, yeah, you can see there's my computer setup right there. And then I've got a second screen where I see stuff. That's where I keep you guys. And then over there, it's my D&D books and my current light and some artwork that I have. Yeah, so this, I think, makes it, I feel a lot quieter. It feels a lot quieter in here, which is very exciting for me. All right, let's turn this back, get you guys back set up. Hi, how you doing? All right, so if it sounds a little more, slightly more professional, it's just LARPing. Right. So yeah, you are on time. That's terrorism, bro. What else is going on here with you guys? That was it. Okay. Gonna be a short show because I have been contracted by the European Values Survey to help them promote a data release since they can't do an in-person conference. And that video is due at the end of the day on Monday. I want to make sure it's on time, so I'm going to work on the weekend. I worked about 5 hours on it yesterday. I'm going to do like another 3 or 4 today so that I have all of the component parts ready. It's not stuff you need to know, but anyway. I almost thought the music being on was a stylistic choice. Yeah, I'd probably get something that was a bit longer. I mean, I'm glad you could hear me over the music. That's important. But no, I just effed up. Lucky wanderer. I just effed up. All right, so let's talk about something substantive this time. Yeah, this is the screen I want. Bam! Boom, 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 boom. Look at me being almost competent. I'm also hoping now, also while I'm updating you guys, while in the last several months, I have been doing a lot of original writing, and I've written, I think I've mentioned this before, it's a handbook on how to do educational videos. It starts at project management and time management goes into storyboarding and script writing, then how to record audio, how to record video, how to edit things together, do post-production in terms of both improving audio and video and adding special effects, transitions, credits. Then what to expect when you put something up on YouTube, the title, the description, the thumbnail, the metadata, the Creative Commons or copyright license, so it's pretty comprehensive. And then there's a little bit too on social media that somebody else took the lead on that chapter. I'm hoping it would be quite widely relevant to people. That said, when I do a lot of original work, I struggle to make creative content on the side because all of my creativity and energies are being put into that new thing, which is different from, say, like if I'm now going to be moving into preparing a data set for release. So we have 2 actually sets of transcripts from focus groups. That's already, like all of the text exists, and I just need to sort of format it and organize it. That's much less work. In fact, it's quite dull. And those are the times that I can creatively flourish. So I'm hoping, now that I've got Toonly and Doodly, I might be doing some more short educational videos to kind of counter right-wing talking points and crap. But I'll keep up this little chat with you guys, checking in on a Sunday and listening to me babble in the background, probably while you do something more productive than I'm doing right now. All right, let's look at the early vote in 2020. Okay, I saw this article that I disagree with entirely, but we're gonna, I know that someone is keeping track of the early vote I saw on Twitter. So let's go on Twitter and look up early vote as well. 2020 is going to be an historic election for turnout because of the nature of the pandemic. But one thing that might come out as a consequence is a real long-term structural transformation in the way people vote. Now, that's a lot of kind of political sciencey terms all at once, and I'm not saying you guys couldn't figure that out, but let me explain what I mean by that. One is that if I can spell at the same time as I talk, all right, make everything into a little song. We'll pause this. We know with the pandemic, a lot of people are not confident or feel safe going to vote in person. There's also just the physical obstacle to in-person voting during a pandemic. If you think about the fact that only a small proportion of Americans traditionally have voted on before the election, most people were voting in person. To do that now with social distancing means that, you're going to have enormous lines if there's any kind of backup at a polling station. And it's going to be the first week of November. People are going to be stood outside in lines for, they don't know how long, potentially, to vote. And so in order to minimize the risk of the spread, as you know, a lot of states are in the process of ramping up their either vote by mail process or their absentee process or their in-person early voting process. And that is an uneven situation because of the fact that Republicans don't want people to vote. Well, they don't want people who don't vote for them to vote. So let's talk a little bit about changing the way that people vote, right? So that's the temporary shock, as it were, to the system. So let's think a little bit about how early voting, absentee voting has worked in the past. Now, vote by mail is a kind of different beast altogether because there are states with long traditions of mail-in balloting. Oregon, Utah, I think California's been doing it for a while now. And so that's a little bit different from people who normally would vote in person or count on voting in person, switching to an early voting method or for an absentee request and voting absentee. Yeah, you did your rest to vote by mail. Woo! In regards to early voting, John Doe says, it will really make a difference since gerrymandering is still a thing called by a different name. Yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit about voter turnout rates and this whole early voting thing. Right. So what we know from just looking at the data is that Republican voters are more consistent voters. That is in part explained by the fact that older white people tend to vote Republican. They're more likely to vote Republican than for the Democrats. At least in the cohorts that we've been observing so far. That I don't know if that's going to change after this election, or if that's going to be a longer term change, or if even the millennials today will be voting Republican in 40 years' time. Who knows? But what we can only go with is the data we have today. And the reason why Republicans have a more reliable base of voters is just that older people turn out more often. They are more likely to care about not only who's president, which is usually the driver for high turnout elections, which is a bit ironic. The election on which you have the least impact, your one vote in like 160 some million, gets people to turn out because people know about it and they see the contests, and there's a lot of campaign materials, and everyone generally knows the idea of the office of the presidency. But they won't vote for their local, like their town council. Now, older people, they're all keyed into that. One, it might be their friends doing that job because they're retired, and who's going to sit on the town, who's going to be the town clerk, might be, somebody who is retired and needs a little extra money, so it's their friend. Or maybe they're really worried about the local retirement center or the senior center being funded for a project, yada, yada, yada. They just have the time and the lifelong experience of interacting with government that gives them an incentive to vote in every election. So the older you are, generally the more likely you are to turn out for an election. And for Republicans, having that skew of older voters means that they have a pretty reliable base that will always turn out. Democrats, on the other hand, because it is a party of people who have a lower economic security, and there's a lot of costs to being up on who's on the town council or the city council, or who's running in the mayor's race, and what's different in terms of their position. When you've got kids and school and your job, and you're trying to make your house payment and everything else, you're still in that sort of part of your life. You don't have the time that a senior citizen would have to pay attention to those kinds of things, especially if you're a retiree, or if you were like a half retiree working. Now, I'm not going to say that all seniors have it easy. A lot of seniors are being parents to their grandkids, and that's all that stuff is going to have an impact. But if you look at people who are, let's say, in the child rearing age group, and if they're economically struggling, they have a lot more things to worry about than like different city council reps. So they're less likely to turn out in elections that don't have easy information available. When you have a presidential election, there are ads on TV all the time. It's a high profile job. You don't have to know a lot about the two presidential candidates to know where they stand, especially when you use parties like the Democratic and the Republican Party as heuristics. You generally know what you're going to get. Whereas you've got a nonpartisan city council race, you got to look up what people's positions are on garbage collection, right? And so as a consequence, our voter base, even though it's larger in terms of the number of people who would vote for our candidates, it's harder to get them to the polls. Or if they, even if they wanted to get to the polls, they might not feel like they have enough information to make a good decision. And as a consequence, they just decide, I'd rather vote for nobody than vote for the wrong person, which is irrational. That's not I understand that reasoning. It's not being unreasonable. But the thing about early voting, now all of that is predicated on the idea that there is one day to vote. All of it is predicated on the idea that you have to organize your life and your childcare and your work schedule around taking time out. And some places, I think Wisconsin allows you to take time off without pay to go vote. Your employer can't stop you. On the other hand, you have to try to exercise that right. You have to, and if the line is 11 hours long and you never come back to work, technically your employer can't punish you for that, but you think that they're going to be happy with you? So with Election Day being on a Tuesday, which is just weird if you ask Europeans. Like, why do you guys vote in the middle of the week? Why don't you vote on a weekend or over a weekend? That makes a lot more sense. We don't. And so the cost of organizing your life around driving to where the polling place is, organizing your childcare, or taking your kids with you and giving them something to do, parking, waiting in line, having your ID, having all, your proof of residency with you, or your check, whatever you need. All of those things only have a 24-hour window. And as a consequence, there are a lot of people who might intend to vote or want to vote who just don't get the chance. They just don't get around to it. They might even go to the polling station with every intention of going and then see the line and go home. They might park their car and walk and wait in line for 2 hours, and then they got to go collect the kids from the babysitter. They don't have any more time. So our Democratic voting base, it's more tenuous in terms of its actual turnout ability. If you've got a full day, you can't go at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 8:30 in the morning. You just pick and choose your times like a retired person can. All of that changes with early voting. All of that changes with absentee balloting or voting by mail. And as a consequence, I think one of the knock-on effects of this switch to pushing the availability of voting much earlier than just the day of the election is that we're going to have a chance as Democrats to convert a lot of likely voters who didn't actually materialize at the polls for whatever reason into actual voters. Whether that's because they're voting absentee or they finally send in their mail ballot because they're not going to go and try to turn it in on the day or whatever. People who now early vote, I think this is all good for us. There was a very good website. It is mind-blowing how many more people are voting early than they did in 2016. Even with the pandemic, you would expect quite a bump, but I had no idea. I think there's a combination here. It is not simply that people are voting early because of COVID. I think that especially for Democrats or people who lean Democrat or people who aren't even Democrats, they just hate Trump. Republicans, former Republicans, independents who are fed up of this guy are highly motivated. They've been waiting potentially for years for an opportunity to vote against this guy. And because early voting there's such a lead up to it, they are able to do it early on. So let's take a look at some of this. Yeah, John, I'll admit I'm guilty of doing that. Went to vote, saw the lines wrapping around the building, went back home. Yeah. And that's not unreasonable. But the thing is, with early voting, you can go back next week. And if it was election day, you couldn't. All right, so all of these Trump voters who are going to be waiting till election day to vote, yeah, some of them are going to be in really rural areas that don't have lines, that don't have to stand outside and wait uncomfortably like Black people do and poor people do all the time for elections in America. They're going to experience that for the first time. And how are they going to handle it? If you're 75 years old and it's a snowy day in November, are you going to stand outside for 3 hours waiting to vote? Are you going to leave and come back and hope the line is down and it doesn't go down? And then it's 8 o'clock at night and the polls are going to close if you don't get in line, but the line is longer now because everyone's trying to get in before the polls close, and you might have to wait till midnight to cast your vote, and you're 75 years old. You going to stand in line for that long? I mean, I'm not saying that I don't want people to vote. I'm just saying that the consequence of these Trump voters who are all saying, I'm going to vote on election day, whether they're 75 or 45, they're just assuming that things are going to be like they always have been. Whereas with COVID, they're just not. There's going to be more safety things, right? Lucky Wanderer says, laughs in Australian mandatory Saturday voting that makes the experience quick and easy and ends with a democracy sausage. Yes. The wonderful democracy sausages of Australia. Anyone with a lick of sense should be like that one IASIP meme when it came to Trump. I don't know what that means, but other people in the chat who are hipper and cooler than me may. All right, and so the combination of, I think Trump attacking the mail mail-in ballot, mail-in ballots and absentee ballots just generally, Trump going after them has actually had the effect of, I think, pushing a lot of people who otherwise may have voted absentee are going to show up and do in-person early voting instead, which is good because there's more things that can go wrong with an absentee ballot than with an in-person early vote ballot. So that actually, I think, is going to work out into our favor. And as I said, the really big thing is that we're going to end up converting these sort of likely voters into actual voters. So that's one big knock-on effect. The second thing about it is, once you've voted, you can't change your mind. And I know that seems kind of obvious, but from a campaign's point of view, if you know you can bank a vote, then you can focus on other voters who are persuadable. So even if you were to, like, I remember seeing some coverage of the Scottish referendum, the yes/no on Scottish independence, and people were able to mail their ballots back early. And about 3 days or 4 days before the election, some news came out about the implications of a yes vote or a no vote. I can't remember which one it was. And there were people on the news complaining, like, I already voted, but had I known this, I would have voted the other way. Like, well, too bad, so sad. Like, that's the breaks. Like, that. I'm not saying they shouldn't have waited till the last minute to vote, but it's done. Like, it's over. You cast your vote. And so as a consequence, that's it. You're locked in. People who wait until election day, in theory, could change their mind walking up to the polling place. Or they might be undecided and deciding, on the way to the polling place. So for Democrats to get a lot of their registered voters in, and I think like the retention of, I think what is it, about 4 to 6% I saw of Democrats say that they're going to vote for Trump. And, that's actually not unusual. You always get, I don't know if it's like people misreporting their ID or misreporting their candidate preference, or if it's Trump supporters who are trying to mess with the survey people who are lying, or just really bizarre Democrats. So whatever it is, you always get this sort of like static margin of error, just little kind of noise there of people who don't do what you're kind of expecting in that way. But on the other side, the number of self-identified Republicans who say they're breaking for Biden is like 12% to 15% or something. So that kind of break is entirely expected, but if it's skewing in the other direction, what we can say is that if you see someone with a Democratic registration, let's just say 95 times, for every 95 returned ballots, for every 100 returned ballots, 95 of them are probably going to be for Joe Biden, and maybe 5 might be for Trump. Whereas if you see a Republican ballot being returned, you can say, well, about 88% of those will go for Trump and 12% will go for Biden. And as I watched this morning the Lincoln Project interview on 60 Minutes, which is interesting because I've talked on this show about how this cohort of white Republicans who really believe the lie about America being good and fair and a meritocracy and all that sort of thing, they're having their come to Jesus moments, realizing that their party coddled racists. And I know they point out the South and the West, but they coddled racists all over the country. Let's just be honest here. There's a lot of white racism, a lot of white racists, I think, in the North, in the Midwest, like myself. We're like, oh, that's a Southern problem. No. It's a white people problem. It's a white culture problem. I'm not saying every single white person is racist, but every single white person is embedded in a white racist culture. That is our history. That is our cultural history as white people in America. And so that is the framework from which everything else follows. Whether or not we resist it or we try to perpetuate it, that is our jobs now as people who are taking white American culture forward to reject racism and call it out and acknowledge all of its forms. And they had a bit of a come to Jesus moment on those issues, which at the end of the day, it's better than not. You can say it's too late. And, I understand people who want to be angry about that. I'm not going to judge them. But I would rather have those kinds of conversations happening with former Republicans than not. Because how do we get to the root of racism? It's white people who have to deal with the fact that we're the ones who have the most power to end it. and most influence. Not because black people don't have influence, it's just white people have the positions of power because of white supremacy. And we have to dismantle that in order to make it fair. Yeah, plenty of white racism in the North. Yeah, schools that showed northern states are actually more segregated than in the South. Yeah, it's a sort of like a Midwest nice, polite racism, which it's not as aggressive. It is very passive aggressive. It is very microaggression, and because white people use a little bit of the mantle of, oh, well, we were the side that fought against slavery, they use it as a moral justification for that. I'm not racist, when they are. So I'm going to look a little bit at some of the early in voting. And I wish there's a great website that is tracking early voting. I was hoping that just by looking here, I would see the picture and early vote. I'm going to try early vote instead. And there's a whole website on it. 21, I'll put million. Maybe that'll get me there, because I know that there was one about the 21 million in the last couple days. Yay, I found it! Woohoo! Let's have a look at that link. But first, let's look at some of the other ones. Talked about there were some good pictures there about some states have partisanship breakouts, others don't. Yes, so early voting numbers are inspiring. Georgia, 22 million votes cast. Okay, so here we got some coverage on CNN. This is, I take it from today. Yep, today's the 17th. Nearly 22 million votes cast in 45 states in D.C. To put it in perspective, I saw the data that a total of, I'll have to go back and look at it, but Wisconsin numbers are like just blowing up in terms of early vote. So we see first day of in-person voting up 42% in Georgia, 101% in North Carolina, and Tennessee up 91%. That, the whole Biden's base isn't as enthusiastic. They don't say they're enthusiastic for him as they are for Trump. As I've said, it doesn't matter if you're voting because you love Biden or because you hate Trump. It's still a vote for Biden. Your motivations ultimately do not matter. If you're like, oh, I love Joe Biden, I just want to go to the polls to vote for Joe Biden, that vote counts as much as someone is like, I am so sick of Trump and Joe Biden is not a sociopath. And he can actually lead this country in a presidential way and, restore us back to some sort of normalcy. If that is if that's your baseline, that your vote counts as much. Enthusiasm matters normally because of whether or not people actually move their butts to get out to the polls. But the hatred for Donald Trump, that's as much of a motivator as enthusiasm. So motivation doesn't have to be positive. In fact, fear, anger, all of those things are sometimes more effective, sadly, motivators than like hope and change. It's nice to be inspired, but at the end of the day, if you're scared of something or you're furious about something, you're more likely to do something about that than if you're like inspired about something, so these numbers are amazing. And the other thing that we know from polling is that, yes, Republicans, there are still going to be Republicans who vote early, and there are still going to be Republicans who vote by mail, but more because of the way that Donald Trump has gone on and tried to destroy the credibility of early voting and vote by mail, by absentee balloting and vote by mail, even though he wants to make those sort of like a distinction, but his voters probably don't understand the difference, or there's really no difference in most cases, in most states. They're waiting till Election Day to vote. They are waiting for Election Day to vote. Look at the COVID outbreaks going on in Wisconsin, one of these states that he needs to win. Look at the COVID outbreaks going on in Florida. We are now in the middle of a spike. You're seeing spikes going on all over the country, and that is not going to get better in the next 3 weeks because people aren't changing their behaviors. So the COVID numbers are going to be going up in a lot of important voting states, and that's going to mean that people are going to be cracking down on the safety, security, social distancing measures and enforcing them. So mask wearing, social distancing, and that's going to make it harder to vote on the day. So the fact that we have such enthusiasm that a whole bunch of Democratic voters, or voters for Democrats, however, one are people who identify with the party, the other are people who vote for the party but don't identify with it. That's how I'm defining them in my head. Their votes are in. You don't have to get them to the polls on election day. Their votes are in. And the other important thing about this early in-person voting and mail-in voting or absentee balloting is that it is normally areas that are predominantly Democratic in their turnout that are under-resourced, where you get ballots that run out, where you get machines that don't work, right? Or you only have so many workers and they don't keep up with the actual numbers of people who need to come in and cast their ballot. If we get a third or half of the Democrats, people who are voting for the Democratic ticket or candidates in before the election day, that removes every single person waiting in line on election day so we can get more of our base. Those people won't drive up to the parking lot and then drive out because the line won't be twice as long or 30% as long because those people have already voted. So it's not only about banking your vote ahead of the election, it's about reducing the burden on getting people through the lines on election day. And that's only going to help us. So, yeah, the schools aren't technically, just de facto, not de jure. And yeah, I am incredibly motivated. I'm incredibly inspired by the turnout. And I mean, yes, it is depressing. I want to say it is humiliating and an embarrassment that people have to line up for 8 hours to vote in America, supposedly the land of the free. Hey, look at this first-time voter at the early voting. Come out and vote. What else have we got here? Yeah, and the other thing that we know from the returns is that the Democrats really are banking quite a lot of their vote early. It's not simply that that's people generally are voting early. It's that Democrats report they're going to vote in multiple more ways, than on election day, and they're actually doing it. When you break it down by party registration. Let me see if I can do one actually on by party, and then we'll look at that website. Ultimately, I'm probably feeling less stressed about the election result now that I see how many people are voting than I was 3 weeks ago. I've actually become kind of chill. I'm not saying that I think it's a done deal. What I'm saying is seeing people show up, seeing people standing in line, seeing people proud to cast their vote, it gives me confidence that the outcome is going to be the right one, the pro-democratic one, not Democratic Party like pro-democracy. And ultimately, it is a numbers game, right? If you can't vote in a majority Democratic district because of Republican shenanigans and under-resourcing, well, they've got plenty of time to print off ballots now, although you can talk about a ballot problem in, I think it was Ohio. But we're just getting our voters out, and their votes are counting. So that's great. Let's see if we get... Party registration. We're doing anything here? No, we'll look at the website. Yes. All right. This is where it's going to blow your mind, y'all. And then, like I said, I have to go. I'm going to do some work. I've got D&D tonight on my channel, and I've got to edit the video from the last session because that was a disaster. Talking about technical problems. So it's just going to be a short one, peeps. But I'll be back with you next week. I'm on vacation from Wednesday, so chill. Also, I've read the next section on the social construction of reality. I really want to get to that. but I can't until this manuscript is at the door. And even though it was done on Friday, the person who's meant to submit it didn't turn it in. And now I'm like, well, if it's going to be late, then give it back to me because I already see some things I want to fix. So if it's late by 1 day, it doesn't change if it's late by 1 day or 3 days. So just give me my manuscript back. I'll fix that now, and then you can send it off. All right. So first, turnout as total votes cast as a percent of the 2016 turnout. You can see down here you've got sort of like a fading to blue 20%. And I have to say I'm not that thrilled about this this map. It's a little bit on the vague side. I wish instead of doing this sort of lighter blue to darker blue, they would almost just do different like solid lines and hash lines and dots, because this is a little bit on the crap side. Oh, I guess if you hover over it gives you the actual percentage. All right, so total votes cast as a percent of 2016 vote. You can see in Wisconsin, my home state, 28%, Minnesota 30%, and Michigan 28%. So yeah, let's just like take a little look-see. I wish they would give the raw numbers because sometimes it's hard. Total ballots returned in person or early voting. Some places, like I know in Wisconsin, they're just starting early voting now. And yeah, it's very, I kind of like this in that they're keeping track. Here, okay, right, here's the return rates. This site could be way better, honestly. But the important thing is the total number of those of the parties with party registration. So 26.8 million people. I think the number was, I did a tweet on this in terms of early voting in Wisconsin in 2016 was like not very much. It was like a million, I think, out of it. And we're almost to a million before in-person voting started in Wisconsin. So yeah, it's just going to, you're going to see massive amounts. I think it's going to be a boon for Democrats. I think it's going to be and for those people who voted by absentee, who made some mistakes and maybe their ballot got thrown out, the fact that you just keep throwing more at them, some of them are going to get, be right. Some of them are going to have errors. Some of them are going to be done and accepted that maybe not have voted before. And also, because Trump made people worried about posting their ballot and it arriving in time, they're moving to in-person voting, which has a lower error rate. So, yeah. Actually, I just realized that this show is going to be way shorter than I otherwise would say. I'll see what you guys have to say in the chat, but I do really need to get some work done. So that's going to be my main thing. Let's see what this is. After analyzing data based on research for party registration changes, early voting, and polling errors that hide roughly 15% of Trump voters, this is a likely no. No. Any state Biden isn't winning by 8% is going to be a Trump win. They're smoking. I don't even know where they get this. They said it was questionable when I brought it up. This is just hilarious. The actual sort of models put, so let's look at 538. I think that they've got Biden at like an, oh, that's definitely not it. Okay, 538. No, just 538. There we go. Oh, you have to write it out. Democrats don't need to win Georgia, Iowa, Ohio, or Texas, but they could. Yep. Agreed. I think they ran the numbers and politics. They've got Biden well over, I get 300 and some. Polling averages. Do they have the, don't generally, let's see, approval ratings. We'll look over at the aggregates. They may have something in the national polls here that will link up to their predictive modeling. New. All right, but they still have Biden up by almost 10 points. I'll try 538 presidential predictions 2020. That'll work. Forecasts. Is that the one? Yeah, I think that's the one. Right. Donald Trump is running out of time. Joe Biden leads by double digits in national polls, and state-level polling is only slightly closer. In fact, Biden's lead is so large, traditionally red states like Georgia, Iowa, Ohio, and Texas might go blue. We've still got a little over 2 weeks to go before the election, and Trump needs the race to tighten, which it can't. Sorry, editorializing. During that time, we're still way past normal polling error territory for Trump to close the gap. The other thing is that, what these models don't take into account, of course, because it's not particularly usual, but for Trump to tighten the race, that has to mean that there are people who are persuadable. There's not a lot of persuadable voters left out there, and some of those persuadable voters will vote before Election Day. So Trump doesn't have until November 1st. He's running out of time every time somebody votes. It's done. Unless it's his voter, he's lost another opportunity to convert someone, or at least get them to not vote for Biden, if nothing else. Right. So let's just look. Yes, Biden is favored to win the election. Hi there, I'm 5e Fox, and I'm here to show you around. Each of these maps is an example of how things might shake out on Election Day. If you know anything about modeling, they'll run different simulations with different variables in terms of turnout and blah da 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 da, based on ceteris paribus. Other things being equal, what happens if we change this? What happens if we change that? And generally, I think, as you can see, most times, I think it's 80%, 88% of the time, the model, based on the current data and what we know, if the election were held today, would predict a Biden win. Now, obviously, something huge might happen. You never know. But we've got the time for something huge to happen is running out. The time for something really big to change the dynamics of the race every day that goes by is running out. And the two things you can never have enough of in a campaign are time and money. And you can raise money, but you can't get back time. So, like I said, I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling okay about the election outcome. Now, that's not to say I'm feeling okay about Trump not pulling any voter shenanigans. That's a completely different topic. But in terms of the first part of people showing up and using their vote to make a statement or to support certain policies or to whatever, for whatever reason they are showing up at the polls. They're showing up. They're showing up in amazing numbers and with dedication that should not be required to vote in a democracy. And so, if anything right now, the American people are giving me hope. It's not Biden. It's certainly not Trump. It's the American people. They're the ones who are giving me some chill right now. And I don't see any reason why these lines I don't see any reason why it's going to just fade out. It seems to be the case that people are still showing up, doing their bit. Early voting starts. They're there. They're mailing in their requested absentee ballots. As long as we do that part, then we have done everything we can to set ourselves up for victory. And after that, we'll have to see what the lawyers say. All right. This is just, I'm going to have to reply and laugh at this. Completely intolerant of leftists and their allies' tolerance is weakness. You can just tell you what this person is like. That's hilarious. I would have got 57 followers. Who cares what they think? I'm just going to send one back where it's Biden wins every state. That's what I should do. And just say, after analyzing the data based on research, there's no straight state that Trump is going to win. All right. Well, guys, sorry to cut this short. Sorry to cut this short. Although I think more than ever, this is the most uplifted, positive, election-based coverage I've done since Trump got elected. Maybe 2018. I was kind of happy about stuff. Next time, maybe we'll look at the Senate, preview where those races are, and that'll be. It just, like, the other thing is that we're still so far away from the election. With 28, whatever it was, million people have voted. Yeah, we've got the 25th, and then we still have one more weekend before we have 2 more Sundays before the election. So let's see what happens in the next week. Maybe there's something else I'll be covering at this time. Otherwise, I'm planning on doing, besides my D&D, I'll do my editing on that video shortly. And the other thing I wanted to tell you is I'll be talking to Kevin about doing trash movies, where we're going to cover the 2 films, terrible films, Armageddon and Manos, The Hands of Fate. So just want to say to people who stop by in the chat, Neo Ripshaft, Chili Bite, Lucky Wanderer, who else I saw in there, Trans Gamer Girl, hi, see you soon, John Doe, DNF fan, all of those people who stop by, and all those people, Pandinus Rex, all of anyone who stopped by and left a comment in the chat, or if you stop by after the show to watch it, not live. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I do appreciate it. Stay well, stay healthy, stay good, wherever it is, whenever it is you are. I have been Christy. Y'all have been awesome, and we'll talk to each other again very soon. Okay. Bye-bye.